Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday Learning Bhagavatam class. Happy New Year to all. So today's class is given by Prabhupada Prana, who's given several classes before, so no doubt you'll know him quite well. Today, Prabhupada Prana is giving a class on Canto 8, Withdrawal of the Cosmic Creation, Chapter 11, King Indra Annihilates the Demons. Hare Krishna Prabhuji, welcome to Learning Bhagavatam.
Hare Krishna, and happy Krishna Conscious New Year to everyone. So, shall we just begin to read the chapter, or shall we begin with some kirtan?
The kirtan would be lovely, Prabhu, to start us off, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay. I think usually it's a bit difficult for you to follow in the kirtan, isn't it, because of the synchronization?
Correct, yeah. I mean, I can follow if you want.
Yeah, okay. We can do that. All right. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
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 Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari.
Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari.
Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradari.
Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari.
Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana.
Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana.
Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana.
Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana.
Yamuna Tiravana Chari.
Yamuna Tira Vanachari.
Yamuna Tiravana Chari.
Yamuna Tira Vanachari.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
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 Jaya Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradari.
Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari.
Jaya Gopi Janna Vallabha Girivaradari.
Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradari.
Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana.
Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana.
Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana.
Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana.
Yamuna Tiravanachari.
Yamuna Tira Vanachari.
Yamuna Tiravanachari.
Yamuna Tira Vanachari.
Jaya Rasa Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari.
Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada,
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada Ki.
Jai.
So today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam chapter 11 entitled King Indra Annihilates the Demons. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So, thanks for inviting me along to speak. We had quite a late night in Edinburgh last night with Kirtan through to almost 4 in the morning. And so it's been a bit of an unusual day. First day of the year is often like this. So it's nice to be with you to discuss Srimad Bhagavatam. And so we'll just read through the summary first, and then we can go through some verses. And if anyone's got any questions, then we can give some time for that. So this is chapter 11 of the 8th Canto, King Indra Annihilates the Demons. As described in this chapter, the great saint Narada Muni, being very compassionate to the demons who had been killed by the demigods, forbade the demigods to continue killing. Then Shukracharya, by his mystic power, renewed the lives of all the demons. Having been graced by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the demigods began fighting the demons again with renewed energy. King Indra released his thunderbolt against Bali, and when Bali fell, his friend Jambasura attacked Indra, who then cut off Jambasura's head with his thunderbolt. When Narada Muni learned that Jambasura had been killed, he informed Jambasura's relatives, Namuchi, Bala, and Paka, who then went to the battlefield and attacked the demigods. Indra, king of heaven, severed the heads of Bala and Paka and released a weapon known as Kulisha, the thunderbolt, against Namuchi's shoulder. The thunderbolt, however, returned unsuccessful, and thus Indra became morose. At that time, an unseen voice from the sky came from the sky. The voice declared, "A dry or wet weapon cannot kill Namuchi." Hearing this voice, Indra began to think of how Namuchi could be killed. He then thought of foam, which is neither moist nor dry. Using a weapon of foam, he was able to kill Namuchi. Thus Indra and the other demigods killed many demons. Then, at the request of Lord Brahma, Narad went to the demigods and forbade them to kill the demons any longer. All the demigods then returned to their abodes, following the instructions of Narad. Whatever demons remained alive on the battlefield took Bali Maharaj to Asta mountain. There, by the touch of Shukracharya's hand, Bali Maharaj regained his senses and consciousness, and those demons whose heads and bodies had not been completely lost were brought back to life by the mystic power of Shukracharya. Om Gyanatmarandasya Gyananjanasilakaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Bhakam Karoti Vachalam Bhangam Lagayate Gurum Yakripatamam Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So that was the summary of this chapter. And before we go into any verses, it's interesting to see that Narada Muni has been compassionate to the demons, but we also see that Bali is considered amongst the demons here. And of course, Bali is a great devotee. And it's interesting that at a certain point, Narada Muni seemed to interfere, and he sent Namuchi, Bala, and Paka, basically by informing him that Jambasura had been killed. Then he incited revenge in Namuchi, Bala, and Paka. And sometimes Narada Muni does this, like we see in Krishna Lila. Then he will, sometimes he'll appear to just hurry the pastimes along or to serve the Lord's will in some way. Because he's like the Lord, he's also neutral. He'll serve the Lord in any position. He doesn't necessarily just take the demigod sides and everything. Whatever is the will of the Lord. So this is interesting because it means that the devotee is transcendental to mundane morality. And this is the lesson of Bhagavad Gita, isn't it? That Arjuna had different reasons for not wanting to fight. But Krishna says that Asochanam Vasochas Tvam Pragya Asochanam Vasochas Pandita, yeah, he says, but while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. So Krishna says to Arjuna that you're speaking like a wise man, like a pandit. Pragya, that you are speaking like a learned person, but actually your knowledge is not knowledge. It is knowledge simply referring and related to this material body. And Krishna's will would not be frustrated simply because of Arjuna's moral or immoral considerations. What was moral, what was immoral. The divine will of the Lord is never frustrated. In the material world, we have our understanding of what is right and what's wrong. But even if you ask an atheist, then they are confused about what really is right and what's wrong. There was one man who used to visit the temple. He didn't visit for the purpose of Krishna consciousness. He had another purpose for coming, but he was a psychology teacher in one of the local universities, and he wanted one of the devotees to come and give a talk about the origin of morals. Because you could say that if there's no God, then who's to say what's right and what's wrong, what is moral, what is immoral? And then some people, their morals are, if you don't get caught, it doesn't matter because there's no cause and effect, there's no reactions. This is explained in the 16th chapter of the Gita. The demoniac person, they think there's no God in control. And therefore, the thing is, if you can get away with anything, then just do it, whatever makes you feel good. So therefore, the world is being led by demoniac people where they don't consider any consequences because they don't believe in consequences. Certainly by their actions, you would see that they don't believe in them. Whereas Arjuna, he was considering consequences of his actions, but Krishna said, if you act under my direction, there is no consequence. But actually, if you are inactive, then there is a consequence. So just like Krishna says, one who sees action in inaction and inaction in action actually sees things as they are. So to see action in inaction means that if we don't do something when we should do it, then that brings about a reaction. So, for example, it's the duty of it's a duty to give protection to different living beings, such as children, the cows, the old, etc. And by failure to give protection to these, then one, this is mentioned, I think it's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that failure to give protection, one's duration of life is decreased. So perhaps this is also another reason why in Kali Yuga the lifespan is shortened, because there's so much abuse of vulnerable living entities. So there's one devotee, his name is Prajapati, disciple of Prabhupada, and he asked Prabhupada, according to the sinful activities which would be performed on a daily basis by all the living entities, should there not be some kind of global reaction? And Prabhupada said yes, but the Sankirtan movement is holding back the tide of Kali. So we should understand that when we're chanting our rounds, when we're reading Srimad Bhagavatam, if we go in book distribution, or we're helping this Hare Krishna movement in some way to go forward, then we're actually helping to resist the effects of Kali Yuga. And in this way, Lord Chaitanya's mercy can spread to all the fallen conditioned souls. So it was interesting also that Indra heard this voice in the sky saying that this person, Namuchi, could not be killed by a certain weapon, either wet or dry. And we see a similar thing with Hiranyakashipu. He had obtained so many benedictions from Lord Brahma. First of all, he asked, "Can you give me immortality? This is the purpose of my austerities." And Lord Brahma says, "No, I can't do that, because I'm not immortal, so I cannot give that which I don't have myself." So Hiranyakashipu, being clever, he says, "Well, I want the benediction. I can't be killed in the land or in the sky, indoors, outdoors, day, night, by any man or beast, etc." And Lord Brahma, knowing the will of the Lord and the supreme intelligence of the Lord, gave Hiranyakashipu all these benedictions. But the Lord is so intelligent, even though the Hiranyakashipu wasn't a small timer, he wasn't some like somebody who just happened to be lucky and get rich and famous and powerful. He wasn't just some temporary famous emperor. He was Jai and Vijay. They both fell from the spiritual world purposefully to give the Lord pleasure in the pastimes of sporting with him in the fighting mood. So he's a greatly powerful living entity. And still, even though he used his intelligence to try to become immortal, then the Lord easily just kept all of Lord Brahma's promises intact. And still, he dispensed of Hiranyakashipu. So we see a similar kind of thing here, that sometimes people get these benedictions, but when fate, and fate is the imperceptible movement of time. Krishna says, "Time I am, destroyer of worlds." So when someone's time's up, it doesn't matter what kind of benedictions they got, then the Lord in his supreme intelligence will make the arrangement that that time comes to pass. So it was interesting that when the demigods, generally they consider that if you're fighting a foe and then you're winning, then you don't slacken off. You continue until you defeat that foe wholeheartedly, or incomplete. Because if you don't, then they can come back to cause you further trouble. But here, Narada Muni was shown compassion. Perhaps it was because of Bali Maharaj, because it says here that at the request of Lord Brahma, Narada went to the demigods and forbade them to kill the demons any longer. All the demigods then returned to their abodes. So had Narada Muni not approached the demigods, then they would have continued to kill the demons. And we see later on the will of the Lord is that Bali Maharaj takes shelter of Lord Vamandev. So generally the demigods are favoured by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but we see there's some favour that's coming upon the demons simply because of a devotee in their midst. And this is an important lesson also because if we draw a comparison to ourselves, that we are living in this Kali Yuga, and we may have been engaged in, or still engaged in, typical Kali Yuga activities. I may not have any qualification actually for the association of devotees, but by the mercy of another devotee, at least by the mercy of Prabhupada and his books and other devotees who have distributed them, then we come across Krishna consciousness. And even though perhaps we are not deserving, then we're getting the mercy. So generally the demons, they don't get much of the favour of the Lord because they're envious of the Lord. The envy is manifested in that they simply try to enjoy separately from the Lord and are quite happy to conjure up ideas to kill the Lord, even though that cannot happen because the Lord is Ajita, unconquerable. As a Mordva, no one is equal to or greater than him. But in their illusion, then they're thinking that they can find some way to kill the Lord by starving him, because typically the demons, they will interfere with the devotees' endeavors to perform sacrifices because they're materialistic. They hear that Lord subsists on the sacrifices of the devotees, so they think, well, if we can stop the devotees and the Brahmins making sacrifices, then this will starve out Lord Vishnu. Just as like in medieval times, they would hold a castle under siege. So they're trying to hold Lord Vishnu under siege by preventing the devotees and the Brahmins from performing their duties, their sacrifices. But they don't understand Vishnu as being Satchidananda Vigraha. The Lord is full of bliss, knowledge, and he is eternal. And on account of this lack of understanding, then they just superimpose some materialistic understanding. And this is based on their desire. Because they have the desire to reject God, then Maya will give them philosophies till the end of time to figure ways to reject God. So it's all based on desire. Whereas if the devotee desires to know God, so the Lord will open the path. There's that verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Brahmanda Konya Bhagavana Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Lata Bij, that within the Brahmanda, within the universe, we have been wandering through different species, through different planets, and we can't remember all these different things, but if we have some faith in the Shastra and the spiritual master and the sadhus, then we can understand this is the case. I've been traveling in this material world for a long time. We've been on a little adventure, but this adventure is not really bringing us much happiness, because as long as there's janma mrityu, jara vyadi, repeated birth, death, old age, and disease, then how can there be any happiness? So the happiness in the material world is simply a relief from material suffering. And that's all it is. But we don't know what is positive spiritual pleasure. Simply we're experiencing some temporary relief from miseries in the material world. But by the mercy of some great devotees, then we have come across Krishna consciousness. So regardless of what our previous background is, then we are also on this safe path, just like Bali Maharaj. He was born into a family of demons, and he was fighting on behalf of the demons, etc. But when he got the opportunity for mercy, then he took it. So this is also the question we have to ask ourselves: is we've got a great opportunity for mercy. We shouldn't hold back. We should try to associate with devotees engage in some devotional service. If we are able to visit the temple and engage in some service, do some voluntary service, because Krishna consciousness is not about accumulating some pious credits. This is considered one of the offences against the holy name, to consider that the chanting of the holy name is like some ritualistic benefit, as in Karmakanda. So that is not the case. So our chanting of Hare Krishna, our reading of the scriptures and devotional service, it's not simply to create some good fortune for the next life, but actually so that the next life is the eternal life. So this term Jivan Mukta means that if we engage in Krishna conscious activities, devotional service in this life, then simply whatever we're doing here will continue in the spiritual world. So Narad was instructing the demigods to head back to their homes and give up fighting the demons. And it's interesting that the great sage Narad would do this, but because we said before, as we said, that he's acting on the will of the Lord. So he doesn't question the Lord. He doesn't say, "Oh, I don't agree with that," and make some argument. But actually, he's willing to do whatever the Lord requires of him. So this is the kind of level we should be aiming for as well. And Arjuna came to this point. That was the conclusion of the Gita. Krishna had told him everything, and he says, "Now I've told you everything. It's up to you what you do." So Krishna won't interfere with our free will. Just like I was doing one house program the other day, and I was asking someone to take a little step forward in their Krishna consciousness, and they said, "Oh, when Krishna is willing," I says, "Krishna's already willing. The instructions are there. It's the oldest excuse in the book. When is Krishna? So it's Krishna is not going to come along and take us by the hand and say, 'Okay, now I personally asking you to do this.' He's already asking us in the Shastra. He's asking us through the devotees, through the spiritual master. So we shouldn't think that Krishna will wait until Krishna personally comes before we take the next step. Krishna's already there in our heart, waiting for us to take that step. He won't interfere with us. He won't force us to do anything, because how could it be love? But when we undertake a little bit of discomfort, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of our great acharyas, says, "Give up self-comforting." So when we give up our self-comforting and do something for the pleasure of the Lord, whatever service that may be, we make a little sacrifice, but we're not doing it for some material benefit. We're simply trying to practice devotional service. So this Krishna conscious movement is giving us an opportunity to learn to be pure devotees and to learn the art of finally giving up this fruitive endeavor. Because before Krishna consciousness, simply everything we do, everything we say, we expect some return on it. If we say something, we expect a certain reaction. If we give our time, we expect some pay, or we expect some favor in return. But Krishna consciousness means that we're giving up that mentality we've had for millions of births, where everything we do, we expect some return on it. Anyabilasi tasunyam gyanakamadin avritam anukuyana Krishna anushilanam bhaktirutama. So pure devotional service is performed without any desire for personal benefit and without any desire for any gain. And this is difficult because we are so accustomed to looking for gain in the material world. But we will see later on that Bali Maharaj, even though he had the ability to, at least in the temporary consideration, to be emperor of the universe, then he was willing to give it all to Krishna, because he understood There was nothing was his anyway. Everything belongs to Krishna. And finally, we see he rejected Sukracharya's instructions when Vamandeva asked for 3 steps of land. He asked for 3 steps. Yeah, and then Bali Maharaj granted him that. Sukracharya says, don't give him it. It's Vishnu, he'll trick you. But Bali Maharaj knew it, and he was quite happy to surrender to the Lord. And he had no regrets. So this is another lesson for us, that when all these different stories are there to show us that when we surrender to the Lord, everything works out fine. There's a saying that it'll be all right in the end, and if it's not all right, then it's not the end. So in this way, we should always remain positive in Krishna consciousness and confident that if we just keep on going, when we just keep on going with our chanting, our daily sadhana, our association, our service, etc., then everything will be okay in the end. In fact, everything is okay now, we just haven't realized it. Now, the demigods, they're not without desires. They have some personal desires too. That's why they're still in the material world. They're known as great personalities, but they also are known as prakrita bhaktas, materialistic. They have a desire to enjoy material nature, and they also, it's important for them to have their positions and to be honoured in different ways. So they're still somewhat attached to the subtle things like name, fame, adoration, and gain. But a devotee is to become free from the gross and subtle types of enjoyment. Sometimes when people have got their eye on a bigger prize, such as they want to be a very esteemed person, then they can make austerities, they can abnegate so many different types of gross sense gratification simply because they have a higher goal, which is to be somebody very important. But ultimately, that somebody very important is their fame and their glory disappears in due course of time. Whereas one who serves the Lord, then they're connected with the Lord eternally. And just as the Lord is always glorious, then the devotees are always glorious. So there was a verse here, text 44. The great sage Nara said, all of you demigods are protected by the arms of Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and by his grace you have gotten the nectar. By the grace of the goddess of fortune, you are glorious in every way. Therefore, please stop this fighting. So basically, he was saying that they didn't have to achieve any more glory. They were already praised by their followers, and they have so much glory and so much good fortune already. They didn't have to prove anything. So in this way, Narad Muni very cleverly got them to give up their fighting mentality. And here, the final verse here, Bali Maharaj was very experienced in universal affairs. When he regained his senses and memory by the grace of Shukracharya, he could understand everything that had happened. Therefore, although he had been defeated, he did not lament. So this is the long-term view of the devotee. Like we were saying earlier on, it'll be all right in the end, and if it's not all right, it's not the end. So here, although he'd been defeated, he didn't lament because he understands the Lord has a plan and everything. And when we submit to that plan, because we don't see the whole plan, but if we just submit and understand the Lord does have a plan, so even if we're going through apparently some difficulty, that difficulty may be there for us to learn some lesson so that we can go forward and we can be stronger in our spiritual life, and perhaps we can help others in a similar difficulty. If we don't experience any difficulty, how can we have compassion for others in difficulty? This is Bali Maharaj here. He's not seeing this as a cause for lamentation. Normally, if one is defeated, you see in sports, for example, in football, you have Sukha Dukkha personified. When they win, when their team wins, they're so jubilant, but when their team loses, they're so morose. They're so much conditioned, and this maybe they have in other sports as well, or other endeavors in life. When we achieve something, we're happy, and then when we lose something, we're distressed because we are giving over our happiness to the apparent success or failure. But as Krishna says that one should be steady and in both success and failure. So we see Bali Maharaj is living that. He's not morose on account, he's not lamenting on account of his apparent defeat. And even when he's conquered, when Vamandev puts his foot on Bali Maharaj's head and the demons are thinking all is lost, Bali Maharaj was thinking the opposite. He's thinking he's just got the mercy of the Lord's foot on his head. So this is often what happens is like in material consciousness, then people may think in terms of success, failure, happiness, distress, lamentation, jubilation. But the devotee just thinks in terms of this must be the will of the Lord, because the Lord is always my well-wisher, and therefore I just have to submit to this, and in due course, by the Lord's mercy, then we will see what was the purpose of this. So I think we'd just like to stop here and ask if anyone's got any questions at this point.
Okay, thank you very much, Prabhu. If anyone has any questions, please do raise your hand. If I can just start off with a couple actually that I had. With regards to the demons, I was just wondering, why didn't the demons reform since Prahlad Maharaj was reigning over them for a while? So therefore, wouldn't they be reformed at that period, and therefore their demonic nature wouldn't exist?
Well, Krishna says in the material world there's always two types of living entities, divine and demoniac. So even though Bali Maharaj, he was born in a demon family, he wasn't of demoniac nature. He may have been fighting for them, but his natural tendency was to surrender to Vishnu. But the other demons, they may not have had that same tendency. Just like the brother of Ravan, what was his name?
Vibhishan.
Vibhishan. He was a great devotee, but obviously he must have been quite incognito with that in the presence of Ravan. So amongst the demons, they can be devotees, but it doesn't mean to say that the demons are all redeemed. Now, of course, if the benediction is there that if even someone comes from a demoniac background, if they become a devotee, then so many generations are liberated along with them. But I guess it's an individual thing that the living entities are born into certain situations according to their desires to enjoy or according to their desire to move forward in their spiritual emancipation. Now, generally, the pious are born amongst the higher grade of living entities, and those who are of demoniac, they're born into the lower species or into demoniac types of mentality. Birds of a feather flock together. So, in what way would they have been redeemed, do you think?
Well, just by the mercy of Prahlad Maharaj, would that not be something that they would have got benediction of from the Lord?
Well, the relatives of Prahlad Maharaj, they were how many families, generations back and forth was it? Lord Nrsimhadev gave a benediction. When Prahlad was given a benediction by Lord Nrsimhadev, he said, I don't want anything. And Nrsimhadev says, no, please take. And he said, I just want that my father is liberated. And he said, that's already happened, and so many generations before you and after you will also be liberated. So the Lord is very kind like that. So how that happens, I don't know if it happens immediately or if the Lord makes some plan for the redemption over some period of time. But in terms of the demons being redeemed, even if they are redeemed, there's always more living entities to fill those posts. Just like the material world is never empty. In Chaitanya, Charitamrita, then there was one pastime where all the living entities were liberated, but the universe filled up with those living entities who were lying in dormant states from Mahat Tattva. So there seems to be innumerable living entities who will just fill the different posts according to their desires. In the material world, there's always this struggle between good and evil. So there's a few points can be made in this verse. Perhaps this might show some relevance. So, following the previous defeat, the demigods are revived by the Supreme Person of Godhead and regain strength to fight the demons. So, there's some divine mercy is coming to the demigods there. The Lord seems to be favoring them. Jambasur is attacked. The powerful demon Jambasur attacks Indra, hitting his elephant Airavata with a club, causing it to fall. Now, Airavata was born out of the churning of the ocean of milk, and he was considered to be a divine elephant. So, Jambasura's victory, this chapter highlights the temporary victory of the demons and the humbling of the demigod, demonstrating the Lord's complex play, the Lord's Leela. So the Lord's grace, the demigod's resurgence is solely due to the Lord's supreme mercy. Sometimes it appears that the demigods are about to be defeated and they take shelter in the Lord and then they are redeemed. When the demons are defeated, they don't take shelter in the Lord. And that is the difference. That sometimes, like a devotee is always trying to take shelter in the Lord. And sometimes we don't take shelter in the Lord until the last minute. We try to be, because we think we're the doer of activities, we try to be in control of everything, thinking we can control the outcome. And then sometimes when we see that we can't make any effect, our extent of control is the situation that is out with our extent of control, then we turn to the Lord. But as we become more Krishna conscious, then we depend on the Lord for everything. Not that we don't act, we act, but we depend on the Lord for the result. And then another key theme here is mentioned is that cosmic warfare illustrates the ongoing battle between divine and demonic forces. If there was no ongoing battle between divine and demonic forces, then there wouldn't be the material world. And another aspect of this chapter is showing that even powerful demigods like Indra can be humbled and restored. We see he became despondent when he couldn't defeat with his weapon because this personality had a blessing to not be killed by a dry or wet weapon. So Indra became, because he's thinking he's all powerful with his thunderbolt weapon, then when he was frustrated with that, then he became morose, because it's not just the fact that he was frustrated, but then his pride is also humbled. So in terms of demons being redeemed, we see in Kali Yuga, everyone is considered to be fallen. But the Lord's mercy is coming to all of us here. So actually, although they say Kali Yuga is a fallen age, some of the acharyas say it's the most auspicious age, because simply by the chanting of the holy name, Harinameva Kevalam, Kalonascheva, Nischeva Gatiranyata, simply by the chanting of the holy names, one can be redeemed. So just like those demons may have been redeemed by the mercy of a devotee in their family or in their dynasty, then similarly, when we become devotees, even if our parents, etc., or families, etc., don't become devotees, then by the power of us becoming a devotee, we can bring them great mercy and great fortune. So anything else just now?
Yeah, we've got Sadevi Mataji wanting to ask a question. Sadevi Mataji, would you like to ask a question, please?
Yes, please. Hare Krishna, and thank you very, very much.
Hare Krishna.
And Happy New Year to all of you. Jai Vijay was turned to demons because they wanted to have that lila with Lord Krishna. Could it be also the situation with these demon also that they are just creating a kind of lila for Lord enjoyment?
Certainly is a lila for the Lord's enjoyment. And Bali Maharaj may well have been placed there. I don't know if anybody knows any more details on that, but sometimes the Lord's devotee is placed in a very unusual circumstance so the Lord can enact some pastimes, yeah. And certainly Jai and Vijay, they chose to become demons. They were given the choice of, was it 7 births as devotees or 3 as the enemies? And they conferred with each other and they decided, better we have 3 births as demons and then we can get back to our service in Vaikuntha quickly. So this is what the Lord also wanted. So then he can perform some pastimes. He can do his Paritranaya Sadhanam Vinashaya Chaduskritam. He can annihilate the miscreants and save the devotees. And this way, the Lord can come to the material world, display wonderful pastimes for the living entities, to remember that there is the Supreme Personality of Godhead beyond this material world, and that they can turn back to him because of the Lord's love for the living entities. He's always thinking of new pastimes and displaying wonderful pastimes so that the living entities can be attracted back to the eternal relations with them. So we say there's not a blade of grass moves without the Lord's consent. So it's not that things happen by chance and then the Lord just had to kind of react to what was going on. Everything's going on by the Lord's will, so I would say, yes. This is all going on by the will of the Lord.
May I ask a follow-up question also?
Sure.
I don't remember exactly where I have read it, but I have read it within the Krishna consciousness that demons represent something like ego, like pride, like each demon represents something. Is it the same? Is it the same with this demon that they are fighting with Indra, Lord Indra?
Is your question that the demons are representing something like ego or pride?
Yes, behavior, different condition.
Yeah, well, that is explained in the 16th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the divine and demoniac natures. But we see that even divine living entities, sometimes they display some egotistic behavior, don't they? We see, for example, when Krishna told the inhabitants of Vrindavan not to do Indra Puja, but to worship Govardhan Hill, then Indra's ego was hurt. He felt challenged, so then he became quite demoniac. He started attacking the living entities of Vrindavan, all the devotees, and he was thinking Krishna was just an upstart, so he had decided he was going to annihilate them. And then he realized he wasn't dealing with the ordinary living entities, and he was dealing with the Supreme Lord. And Indra is actually a devotee, but he forgot. And just like us, sometimes we forget we're devotees and we may not behave like a devotee, but we're practicing and we're trying to come to the point where we're consistently behaving like devotees. So even sometimes the demigods, they will do something which is out of character. And here we see someone like Bali Maharaj, who is considered to be a demon. He's actually being a more of a devotee than the demigods. So the ego is there in living entities. Unless one is actually a devotee, then ego is still having some play. And the living entity can, in one birth, become a demon, one birth be a devotee, a demigod, or there can be some lower space of life or a high space of life. But it's all based on some false ego. But when one becomes a devotee, then they realize, actually, I'm none of this. I'm nothing to do with this material world. Naham Viprona Cha Narapti Napi Vaishya Sudra. I'm not a Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra. I'm not a Grihastha, Brahmachari, Vanaprastha, Sannyas, but I'm eternal servant of the Lord, Das Anudas Anudas. So unless one is on this platform of Trinada Pichine in the humble state of mind, always taking shelter in the Lord's holy name, then one is apt to be influenced by ego, and that can take one to any species of life, higher or lower. So this battle between divine and demonic natures is going on in the material world because we have that freedom of will. But once we give up that free will to Krishna and we act solely for the Lord's pleasure, then we don't run the risk of acting out of false ego. This is there in Bhagavad Gita. Mat chita sarvadurgani mat prasada tarshasi chet tvam hankranna shoshasi vanakshasi. Krishna says, if you become conscious of me, you'll cross over all obstacles of conditional life by my grace. If, however, you do not act in such consciousness, not hearing me, you will be lost. So whether one is a demigod in one life, a demon in another life, we're still letting out a false ego. So the real ego is to identify as a servant of Krishna. I hope that gives some light.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Okay. If I can ask just one more question, and then we'll close with today, if that's okay. You mentioned being a devotee, we wouldn't have expectation of return. Sorry, being Krishna conscious. We would give up expectation or desire for any gain. However, when thinking of this, are we still not desiring to be the servant of the Lord and gain entrance to the spiritual world? So is that not still a desire, though?
Well, the Lord wants us to remember who we are, which is Krishna Nitya Das, eternal servant of Krishna. So it's not false ego, that's real ego. So it's not like some superimposition on the mind. This is actually a realization of who we are. Do you want to ask that question again, please?
Yeah. Basically, what you were saying was that Krishna consciousness is to give up expectation of desire for any gain. But what I'm trying to say is that are we not still desiring for the gain of being the servant of the Lord and gain the entrance to the spiritual world?
Yeah. So if we desire to be a servant of the Lord, that's actually a good desire because we don't become desireless. The goal, not like in Buddhism, they talk about being desireless, or in Mayavad philosophy, then the idea is to become desireless. But Prabhupada explains that it's not within the living entity's constitution to be desireless, but to dovetail our desires along with the Lord's desires. So when we do that, to begin with, it's considered that when we Krishna consciousness in the beginning can taste like poison, and then it's like nectar. Material life is like nectar in the beginning, but it becomes like poison in the end. So in the beginning, because we're accustomed to always wanting to enjoy or control, then we try to be the servant, then that's quite, seems foreign to us. But as we continue to do that, it becomes natural, and the taste for trying to be the enjoyer or the controller, it's incompatible with trying to be a devotee. So the desire to be a servant, that is a good thing. That is aligning our desires with the Lord's desires. And we see actually Krishna himself is serving, he's serving the devotees. Just like the spiritual master, he's considered to be the greatest servant. He's taking on the karma for disciples. He's given all his life. He has no public life. He's given everything to thinking how to act for the benefit of his disciples. And he has no thought for himself. So that I'm trying to think which bhajan it was. I think it's Brahma Samhita, where it's mentioned about describing Vaikuntha, the Kalpa Vrikshas, Lakshavriteshu Shurabhira Vipalayantam. So in the Lord's abode, there are wish-fulfilling desire trees, Kalpa Vrikshas. So you think, well, why would there be desire trees if the devotees are supposed to be free from desire? That doesn't make sense. But Prabhupada says that the devotee has no desire to fulfill. You know, you could just imagine in the material world a desire tree that would be all the big queues to the ends of the earth waiting to get access to the desire tree, and it would be given so many useless fulfillment of desires. But Prabhupada mentions that although these trees can fulfill any variety of fruit or any amount of fruit, in the material world, the tree can produce only the fruit which is enabled to do that. Like you don't get an apple tree giving you oranges or vice versa. In the spiritual world, then the wish-fulfilling trees can supply anything for the devotee, but he says the devotees have no desire to be fulfilled. He makes that point clear, that they don't have any desire to be fulfilled. They're already self-satisfied. But sometimes they have desire to serve the Lord, to please the Lord, so sometimes they'll ask, just like maybe they want to offer something to the Lord for the Lord's pleasure. So it's not a personal desire then, it's a desire to try to please the Lord because they want to see the Lord pleased. I'll give you another example. We can just finish on this, as you probably know the story, but I'll say it's relevant. Is that Krishna had a headache, and I can't remember the personalities involved. It might have been Narada Muni or Uddhava. Was approached to give. Well, Krishna says the cure for his headache would be the dust from the feet of his devotees. So some devotees were approached and they says, no, I can't give the dust because I'll go to hell for that. We can't put our dust on Krishna's head. So then they went to the gopis of Vrindavan and immediately they started gathering up all the dust for Krishna's headache. And when they were asked, aren't you afraid, you have to go to hell for this? And they said, oh, it doesn't matter as long as Krishna's headache is alleviated. So their desire was simply to please the Lord, and they weren't considering for themselves. So that's quite a high level of surrender, of course, the highest level of surrender. But our personal desires for name, fame, distinction, adoration, and gain, if they're still there, then we have what's called Mishra Bhakti, or mixed devotional service, maybe devotee. Like sometimes people go on book distribution and they may have a goal to be the top distributor. So it's kind of harmless in one sense, because if it encourages more books to go out, devotees have a transcendental competition. And the transcendental competition is that if someone beats you, then you're not morose, you're happy, because it means if you did well and they did better, then even more books went out. But in terms of desire to be a servant, that's not a bad thing. compared to what we have been desiring. And that's our constitution. So if we desire to be who we really are, that's a good thing if that impels us forward. And then we'll be free from any tainted desire by that desire. Is that okay?
That's perfect. I think the theme about the gopis was perfect in that. Yeah, thank you so much, Prabhuji. If we can kindly all unmute and say our 3 Hari Bols, please. Hari Bol! Hari Bol! Hari Bol!
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Prabhuji, if I can ask you to say the final prayers, I'll just share them with you up here. And if we can all be on mute while Prabhuji says these words. Okay, Hare Krishna.
Okay. Vanchakalpatribhas cha kribas and evacha patidinam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Karantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai.
Nantakoti Vaishnavrinda ki jai.
Jai.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Nitai Gaur Premanande.
Hari Hari Bol.